How did this all get started?
It's a great question. It's not a real short answer. We started the company in 2000, but the story starts before then. Back in the late 80s, I was privileged to be a part of a company that provided services for people with disability. It was a fun experience. It was community-based services for people living in group homes, in-home services, vocational training kind of services, those kinds of things. And we grew quite rapidly. It was a fun time. We grew into several states, and we grew most rapidly in Texas. So we had a lot of opportunities for growth, and it was a great time. In the context of that, a few years later, we were approached by a young man who had been in grad school and had done his dissertation work, and instead of turning in his dissertation, decided that it was something that needed to be turned into a business. And what he had done, he was in grad school, and he was working at a mental health center, and he was responsible for providing services for people with severe and chronic levels of mental illness that otherwise would still be in a state institution, but with the new generation medications that were coming out at that time, they could function at a normal cognitive level. But he had the responsibility of actually making sure they were successful once they returned to their home community, and that they could have a job and keep a job and have a home and have friends and be a regular part of the community, instead of acting crazy and ended up back in a state institution. So what he did was he looked for, how do I teach these people how to do these things, and what are these things I need to teach them? And he actually did all the research and interviewed tons of people, identifying the skills that we expect of each other in a normal, everyday kind of world, whether it's his neighbors or co-workers or friends or family, at school, whatever it may be. And in the process, identified over 300 skills that would be required for them to know. And he began to put that together and apply it in his work setting, working at this mental health setting, and had great success with it. Brought it to us because in the context of what we were doing, we had developed a great reputation for really good service. We had great operational people, and we had a good relationship with the state regulators as well as the local mental health agencies across the state of Texas. We really liked what he brought to the table. The people that we worked with on the developmental disability side of the table, we were usually across the hall from the people that ran the mental health services in the local community center. So it was easy for us to cross that bridge, and I had the relationships with the executive directors typically around the state. We set up a new subsidiary, and I began to take Jay around and meet these executive directors at the centers around the state and tell them what we were doing. We ended up with contracts in, 9, 10, 11 different community centers around the state of Texas, had several clinics. We were treating 3,000 or 4,000 people a day in outpatient mental health services. Had great success doing that and grew rapidly. The company itself at Educare grew quite rapidly. It was twice on the 500 list of fastest growing companies in America. At the same time, we had an opportunity in the context of the mental health company that we had formed with Jay to respond to a request for proposals at one of the community centers down near Houston. And what they were working with the local juvenile probation office and the local school district. They had a group of kids who had all been adjudicated, and they had tried a boot camp approach, and they had tried an alternative campus approach with these kids without any success. These kids were pretty incorrigible, as they might say. We set up our own campus when we were awarded the contract, and they would send their teachers over in the morning to teach the academic curriculum, and in the afternoon our instructors would teach them these, what we call now, social emotional skills. In the mental health context, we always call them psychosocial skills. And we saw great improvements. The school saw great improvement in the kids, and we began to see them referring more kids to our campus for services like this. And eventually they began to ask us to come onto the campus. Could we come and work with kids on the campus, because they had other kids that they knew needed services as well. I think where the light bulb went on for me personally was when we got word that the teachers were saying, hey, we've got this little girl in the back of the classroom who's so shy and introverted, she didn't have any friends. You ought to be able to help her too. Well, these are the child development experts, and they put 2 and 2 together and said these kind of skills are what she needs. And we began to realize that we were helping kids like that. It wasn't just the bad kids, the kids that had the bad problems, that we could help kids like that. That's kind of where the light went on. We weren't having as much fun in the publicly traded company. It was a lot more pressure and a lot more intense. I had a responsibility for 4 different states and 24/7 operations. So we began to look at the education market and actually went to the company headquarters and pitched the idea of going after the education market. They declined, rightfully so. It was way outside their core business, and that's when we began to talk to the company about leaving company employment and do our own thing. But they needed help with the mental health company that we ran because they didn't have any other mental health services anywhere, wouldn't know how to run it. So we contracted with a management contract and some consulting contracts to run the mental health company for them and basically create a new management team to take over the mental health services company. And that's really how the company was started. Now, what we did then was we used those funds as our startup. That's how we bootstrapped ourselves, and we started, talking to educators. We started going to conferences. We started talking about what their needs were, and how we started looking at how do we take something that we've used with our own staff to do on our own campus, on kind of our own alternative campus, and turn that into something that was usable on a lot wider basis. How do we increase that capacity? And it was, what we decided was that we needed an online system, and that's really how LEAPS was started and originally developed at the time. We've probably invested more than $1 million and obviously a lot of time in putting it together. Our company was started in 2000. I think LEAPS was actually launched in early 2004 in a what I would call a very crude beta version of LEAPS. But we've since upgraded that significantly, and now the product that we have addresses the needs from K-12, from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. And has a wealth of resources, including assessment tools and lesson plans. We've grown extensively. We're in 15, 16 different states. Our deepest penetration is in Florida. We're in 2 of the 10 largest school districts in the country. And we've got customers now that have been with us 5, 6, 7 years. So we've had great success. That's really the story behind how LEAPS began and how the company was started.